Okay, so we're going to talk first about the visibility journey, kind of the process of maturing an optimization program through visibility into different maturity levels to get to optimization. We're going to talk about the different methods to achieve optimization success, and then we're going to talk about some new features. Okay, let's start with the visibility journey. So as you have probably experienced when you begin your cloud journey and you begin to build applications or migrate, maybe lift and shift to cloud, it can be a little bit fraught with concern or risk or confusion around which services to pick, which resources to build, which to migrate. And as your organization slowly matures over time, it goes to a stage of awareness where subject matter expertise starts to build, maybe an application in production goes live in your cloud environment. And then as we start to get more and more of our environments running in cloud, we start to get to a place that is difficult to scale, which is safeguards. And whether that's policy management, IAM access, security reviews with your security organization, and really building these safety nets and guardrails into how you run cloud. And it's very easy for organizations to take a pause here because the complexity here and the guardrails that are needed to make sure that we're doing it safe and correct can be numerous. And so I think, as a lot of you probably know, it's important for us to not slow down our cloud migration or our cloud adoption because of safeguards, but to go quickly with them. And this leads us to governance, and this is where we have tagging strategies, we have account naming conventions, maybe we're building a FinOps practice to sort of standardize how we build and use technology on public cloud. And really, the reason why optimization is last on this slide is because it is very difficult to optimize your resources if you don't know who runs them, if you do not have them tagged, if you do not know what they're running and if they're production or non-production. And this kind of makes it difficult to get to a state of running an optimization program over time without all of these other steps completed. And what we've been working on are new capabilities and technologies to hopefully bring optimization a little earlier in your journey, so you don't have to get to that full run state, operations of cloud, FinOps, before you can start really diving into optimization. So within optimization, we think of optimization as 4 key mechanisms or methods to save money on cloud without hurting the business value of your resources. We think of discounts. We think of savings plans, reserved instances, any sort of a discount model that helps you reduce the cost associated to individual resources. We think of deleting. This is, I think everybody's most common experience is like unattached EBS volumes, right? IP addresses that are no longer in use and not serving a purpose. Resources that may be forgotten because application teams have changed or moved or forgotten about things or changed priorities. Right sizing, which we'll talk more about later in this session. The ability to change instance sizes anytime you have a stateful object or resource in your environment to make sure that, did you pick the right size the first time? Can we revisit that size that you selected? Is it continuously the right size over time? And then hibernating. This is also called like suspension or shutdown. The ability for you to turn off workloads when they're not needed, when the users aren't there, maybe they're non-production workloads. That opportunity to, especially for resources that charge by the minute or by the hour, to turn them off. And this is a little bit of a culture change as we come from an on-prem world that loves 5 nines, full uptime, everything's on all the time, to a world where resources are much more fungible. You can treat them a little bit more like elastic on-off. You know, it reminds me of like my children, like every morning I have to get up, walk down my hallway and turn off my kid's bathroom light. Like every morning, like turn off the bathroom light, please. So I bother my daughter about it all the time, but really this same concept applies to cloud, that we can turn these resources off when they're not in use. There's no real reason to run everything 24/7 in a cloud world. Okay, so we're going to talk about these 4 major methods and how they might apply together. The trick behind optimization is not if we do one of these 4 methods, but if we can apply multiple of them together and how they work together to create an elastic cloud environment that is really cost effective for you. Okay, so we're gonna take an AWS bill. We're gonna take a look at what happens when we apply discounts, reservations, savings plans, 3 years, 1 year, whatever kind of commitments you're comfortable with. Say we get an average of 30% savings from purchasing our discounts and applying them across all of our stateful workloads that are consistent. Okay, now we take a look at right sizing. Say we're using auto-scaling groups. Say we're using Compute Optimizer to right size our resources. Say we get an additional 20% savings from our right sizing efforts across our AWS environment. Well, these are very compatible. You can right size and discount at the same time. So let's add it together. Then, let's start turning off all of our non-production workloads. Let's start taking anything where an engineer is no longer at their desk working on something, and let's turn it off. Let's schedule it, let's suspend it, let's get it out of your bill for the hours it is no longer needed. Let's say about 20% savings. And then we have our deletion of non-useful workloads, our unattached storage, our IP addresses, things like that. And then we have a total savings number that can be very large when we're using all 4 of these optimization methods together. Now, a question, actually, Ledian pointed this out yesterday when we were reviewing the slides. You'll notice that these numbers don't add up to 65. That's because there's some overlap between the different savings methods. So if you turn something off, you get less savings from right-sizing it because it's offline half the time, right? And so there's a little bit of an overlap of the different savings methods. So it's not an additive. You actually multiply these numbers together to get your total potential savings. Now, that's one of the cool things we've done with one of our launches that Ledian will talk about later today. So we're doing some of that work for you. Okay, I want to take an example here. So I'm looking at an M5 for XL. I'm looking at the CPU graph. Now, don't right size on CPU only, but I'm just looking at CPU as an example. We're looking at the 95th percentile of CPU utilization on this instance, this M5 4XL. Now, this utilization graph is actually not bad. This actually has a fair amount of usage. We oftentimes see utilization much lower than this, but we can still right size it, even though it's actually utilized okay. So if we were to right-size this workload and still leave a little bit of extra buffer on top of what we see the utilization doing, we can take this 4XL and move it to an M5XL, and that takes the cost, the retail cost, from $660 down to $140. So we save a pretty significant amount of money just sizing this correctly. But we can do more. What if this is a non-production workload? What if we can turn this workload off between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.? Again, a pretty conservative number of hours. Typically, you see utilization kind of a more narrow period of time where it's more like 6 or 8 hours. But we took a conservative example here, and we're turning this thing off between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. Now we save an additional $52, and the total cost of this instance is $88 a month. So this is the cloud way of operating your resources, right? This is elastic. Now we're only paying for the area of this graph that's not shaded in. So let's apply this to your whole estate, right? But then you're gonna ask, what about my production workloads? I can't turn this off nights and weekends. This is production. This is an important asset that I have to keep online all the time. Okay, so let's, oh, sorry, quick interruption here. These are the start-stop tools AWS provides for you to schedule and turn on and off your resources. So take advantage of these tools that are free and available to you so you can go and implement start-stop behavior today. I'll wait for your screenshot. Okay, so this is let's say this is a production workload. Let's apply the same right-sizing behavior. So we still save that $520 a month on right-sizing, but because we can't turn it off nights and weekends, we're going to apply a savings plan. What's interesting here is we apply a savings plan to the new M5XL size instance, and look at the total cost of the instance. It's the same as if we had turned it off half the time. So this instance runs $88 a month in production. The same cost as if we had turned it off. So we can apply and mix and match these different optimization methods together to run an environment for a significant reduction of your total cost. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about discount purchasing. We're going to talk about some best practices that we believe are important to understand for purchasing savings plans, reservations, and prepaying for your resources. So we try to break down your utilization, your usage, into two different major categories. We're trying to identify what is the consistent usage over time that never goes away, kind of the stateful workloads that are always running, and they're important to you and they need to be running, versus the volatile usage, which you'll see kind of if you're looking at your on-demand graphs and your on-demand spend, they'll kind of go up and down. That's normal, that's great. In fact, I love it when I see a lot of ups and downs because it means people are turning things off, rebuilding things, a lot of healthy behavior. We're trying to split those two groups up, and then we want to apply discounts to the predictable portion of your usage. You see the bottom part of the graph there, the predictable usage. That's where we want savings plans and reservations to live. We'd love you to cover all of that really consistent usage with all your prepaid savings plans and reservations. We leave the volatile usage uncovered, and that's a great opportunity for us to continue doing further optimization that does not require discounts. So how do we do that? We recommend incremental purchases of your discounts over time. Sometimes we talk to customers that are like, okay, I want to buy one 3-year savings plan for my entire company. And that can be very, very difficult to manage the day it retires because you have very little time to repurchase that savings plan to make sure your bill doesn't spike in that very brief period of time. So what we like to see is incremental smaller savings plans and reservations kind of layered and stacked up on top of each other. This gives you a lot more flexibility. This helps you avoid the cliff of a single large discount expiring. This allows you to, as the smaller ones expire, kind of make some changes. If you're using instant savings plans, pick a different family or modernize or things like that. So you can retain a fair amount of flexibility while still using discounts by using smaller, more incremental discount purchases. Okay, so we're going to switch gears again. We're going to talk about Compute Optimizer. So show of hands, who of you here has used Compute Optimizer, the AWS right-sizing tool? Okay, awesome. That's 30%. We have some cool updates for you. So Compute Optimizer is designed to help you match up the performance and capacity of your workloads without overpaying. The idea is that we want to make sure all of your workloads are sized correctly so you get the performance you need, and then we don't over-provision enough that we're spending more than we need to. So here's our product description page, but to match resource types and sizes to your workload at the lowest price. So there's a nuance there where the performance part of the statement comes first, and then it says at the lowest price. So the intent behind how we build this product is that first we serve the performance needs, and then we take care of the cost. It's important for us to gain trust with these recommendations so engineers, when they see a recommendation, they can look at it and go, okay, that's not going to break anything. This makes sense for me to do. Here's a little screenshot of our console dashboard within Compute Optimizer. We've made some changes to this recently. We've had some cool new launches. We'll talk more about them. But you'll see EC2 instance right-sizing, auto-scaling group right-sizing, EBS volumes, Lambda functions, ECS on Fargate, and a recent update, license optimization for Microsoft SQL database workloads. So a little earlier this year, we launched an update that allows you to filter all of the recommendations in Compute Optimizer by your tags. This is useful because a lot of customers said it's difficult for us to go into Compute Optimizer and look at 1,000 recommendations. We'd like to break it down by organizational boundaries, and if I've tagged my resources by application or business unit, now they can filter these results down to just the recommendations for your business unit if you're using tags. So it's cool because you can filter by key or key value pair or combinations of both. So if you have business unit and application, you can do both at the same time and get your results. So that allows you to go into Compute Optimizer and look at just the recommendations that are relevant to your workload. We launched GPU right-sizing earlier this year. This was a really fun launch for us. Sizing a GPU is much harder than sizing a CPU, because when you look at GPU utilization, you actually want it to be really high, because these GPUs work best when you're utilizing the whole thing. So this one was a really awesome science experiment for us to figure out how do you size GPUs. What's also cool about GPU right sizing, we still are right sizing CPU, memory, disk, and network in addition to the GPU. So if you have a workload that's using a GPU, but the CPU is idle, we can find additional other instance sizes with smaller amounts of CPU or memory and the same amount of GPU capacity as well. So we can bring optimization to the entire AI, ML world, and we're excited to do so because we're doing this with ML. So we're using ML to right-size ML. It's pretty awesome. Also note, so we're supporting the P3 and G4DN instances. We also do idle detection on these, so we will give you idle recommendations on GPU instances. And this also uses the NVIDIA CloudWatch agent to gather all of the GPU utilization data to make those recommendations. We also launched, this is a lot of launches. We've had a great year. It's been a lot of fun building this stuff. We launched SQL license optimization. What this does, this will scan all of your SQL instances. It will check which features of SQL you're using, and then it'll make a recommendation if you can downsize the license from enterprise to standard, which can save you several $1,000s per month. So we're excited about this launch because databases can be expensive. It's a great optimization candidate. We also launched support for a lot of new instance types. AWS has launched a lot of new capability in EC2. We have the new AMD Genoa instances. We've had a lot of new Graviton. We have the new Flex instance types. And so keeping up to date on all of the recent EC2 launches allows us to have all of these new instance types in the recommendations to help you not only right size and save money and get the best performance, but also to modernize at the same time. So this allows you to do both at the same time because the recommendations will say, OK, go from an M5 to an M7 and downsize at the same time. And because Compute Optimizer knows the performance difference between the M5 and the M7, it knows exactly how many cores you can reduce safely and still get the higher performance of the new instance family. So this is a really important nuance of right sizing. Modernization is a great way to increase the savings amount. I love this because we get better performance and lower cost at the same time, and that's the goal. OK, so what did we announce over the weekend? We've heard from customers that Compute Optimizer recommendations are hard to understand, and we want to understand how they're generated, and we want the ability to control the variables behind the Compute Optimizer engine. So we have built 4 new customization levers or tuning options for you in Compute Optimizer. What we did is we have introduced a new 32-day look-back period. We have introduced the ability to tune the sensitivity on CPU, the headroom, and we've also launched the ability to pick which instance families and types you would like the recommendation results to show up in. So if your company says, OK, we really like the M7A, we want everything to be on M7A, and we're going to buy a bunch of instance savings plans for M7A. You can go into Compute Optimizer, pick the M7A, refresh all your recommendations, and Compute Optimizer will do all of the analysis for which size M7A all of your workloads should be. Then it'll give you these recommendations. So this way, if you have very specific family requirements, like maybe you're using third-party software or you're using technology that requires certain families, you can tune the recommendations to meet your guardrail requirements. So here's what it looks like when you're picking different instance families you want Compute Optimizer to use. You'll see that you have a drop-down list of all the different instance families and types, or you can select all, essentially saying, I want Compute Optimizer to have no constraints. All instance types and families are OK for me in my recommendations. I would recommend not restricting this too much, because if you remove a lot of different instance families from consideration, you're kind of tying Compute Optimizer's hands a little bit, and it makes it kind of difficult to pick the perfect size for each workload. there are so many different families available that Compute Optimizer gets to examine to see which is the right size and fit. So if you cut that list down, the savings amount will go down a little bit because it's not going to be able to find quite as good of a fit every single time if you restrict the list. So pick your instance families, save this, and within 24 hours, all the recommendations will be updated with all of these instance families in the results. So the look back period, there is a new button, a new option in there, the 32-day option. This is a brand new free setting that you can go in and check, which will change Compute Optimizer to use 32 days of utilization data for all recommendations. Now, this is important because this will capture all of your monthly utilization cycles and behavior and patching and maintenance and all of that stuff. So every single recommendation will be aware of your monthly patterns and cycles. I love this feature because we were able to build this and deliver it for free, and this is a great way to just increase the amount of data Compute Optimizer has access to build recommendations for you. We also have the 93-day feature, which is a paid feature called Enhanced Infrastructure Metrics. That's still available to you for a very small fee. And if you have quarterly cycles or patterns that you want Compute Optimizer to be aware of, that's a great option for you. OK, let's talk about the more complicated customization features. In Compute Optimizer, you can now tune its behavior of how it looks at CPU utilization. The first tuning setting is called threshold. You might also know this as percentile. By default, we're using 99.5th percentile to do all of the math and science behind right sizing. That means we take 0.5% of the samples out of the data. Now, that's designed to sort of smooth the data out and throw out some high peak outliers for patches, reboots, and things like that. But it is a very conservative default setting to make sure that recommendations are always safe for you to use. You can now change that. You can now set the threshold to be 95th percentile or 90th percentile. And this allows you to make the recommendations a little bit more aggressive, so you'll see more cost savings from them. And in environments where you know you can take a little bit more risk or move away from the very conservative defaults, this will give you that opportunity to see higher savings and have recommendations where you'll see them move down a little bit more. So that's threshold. We also have headroom. So our recommendations have always had an extra kind of buffer or added capacity in them, just in case future utilization climbs way past what we saw in the last 32 days or whatever your look back period is. Now we're exposing what this number is. We have, by default, a 20% extra headroom baked into all the recommendations. So anytime you see a Compute Optimizer right size recommendation, there's an extra 20% capacity added into it. Now you can tune this. You can set it to 0%. If you know your workloads are not going to go much higher in utilization or they're pretty steady state, you kind of have a strong understanding of your utilization patterns, you can go to that 0% headroom. Or if you are unsure about the future usage and growth of your application, you can use something more conservative like a 30%. One of my favorite settings is 95th percentile, so it's more aggressive on how many peaks it takes out. And then I like to go higher on buffer. So I really like 95th percentile and 30% headroom. You get a little bit more safety on adding buffer, but then it's a little bit more aggressive taking out patches and reboots. And those results, I find, are very trustworthy and safe for applications and save a good amount of money. And I also put in here just some wording. If you download the slide deck later on, I've got some of those terms and notes in here for you, so you can reuse those as you see fit. Inside the preferences page, when you make these adjustments to headroom and threshold, we put a demo graph in here. So we put a graph that's not a real actual EC2 instance. It's a pretend instance. And when you adjust the threshold or the headroom, those lines will move up and down on the graph so you can see how they work. The entire intent here is to explain and describe the difference between threshold and headroom and how they work together. So you'll notice if your threshold goes above the headroom, you're going to get an upsize recommendation. If your threshold is way below the headroom, you're probably going to get a downsize recommendation. So you can kind of play around with that and say, how sensitive do I want to be? How aggressive do I want to be? And kind of make those adjustments and see on a graph the behavior Compute Optimizer is going to give you in return. OK, so that was a lot of information. Bear with me. We have some other updates we launched as well on the discount purchasing capabilities. So how many of you spend a lot of time buying savings plans? That's a lot of people. OK. How many of you have seen the new savings plan visualization feature? OK, less. When you're looking at savings plans recommendations, I implore you, scroll down all the way to the bottom. You're going to see a new button called View Details. This launched kind of end of summer. When you click View Details, we now give you a graph of your on-demand spend. Then we draw a line across the graph where we think your new savings plan should be purchased at. And one of the most important questions I get from customers is, are you taking my weekend dips into account when you give me a savings plan recommendation? The answer is yes. The recommendation engine has always done that. But instead of asking you to trust us, we decided to build the graph so you can see for yourself that the recommendation engine is accounting for your daily peaks and your weekend dips. So now you can see your on-demand spend over time charted on a graph with the newly recommended savings plan purchase overlaid on top. Our hope is you no longer have to toil over spreadsheets for hours or weeks to figure out the right savings plan to purchase. You can now use the savings plan purchase recommendation and the screenshot, and hopefully you can screenshot that and just send it to finance and get your approval for your savings plan purchases. The next question we usually get is, what's my coverage going to look like with this savings plan? So you'll notice at the top we have 3 buttons. We didn't build just the on-demand spend graph. We built a coverage graph, and we built a utilization graph. So you can tab through these 3 graphs and see the result of this recommended savings plan purchase for all 3 of these dimensions to prove that the recommendations drive very high utilization and very high coverage that's safe to use and gets you the maximum ROI on your savings plan purchase. Awesome. We have even more launches. We launched a new recommendation. This was about a month ago. We launched reservation, actually it's reserved node recommendations for MemoryDB. So now you no longer have to use spreadsheets and manually calculate your MemoryDB on-demand spend to purchase. You now get that same recommendation for those MemoryDB nodes. So this is exciting for us because we want to make sure we can provide recommendations for all of your discount purchasing needs so you don't have to go through that manual effort of calculating these yourself. With that said, I'm ready to hand over to Ledian now. We're going to talk about Cost Optimization Hub. All of these features and recommendations, we're so excited to pull them all together for you and bring them to you in one place.
All right, thank you very much for Rick going through all these exciting new cost optimization features. So in AWS, we provide so many ways for you to optimize your cost. And a lot of customers have asked us, hey, can you give us a single pane of glass so that I can understand how much I can save across my accounts, across my regions, and just tell me like how efficient my AWS spend is. Like I'm spending like X dollars on AWS. Like just tell me like if I can spend, I can optimize like 5% more, 10% more. Just tell me where I am in my cost optimization journey. And that is what Cost Optimization Hub is for. So in a nutshell, Cost Optimization Hub automatically identifies and consolidates all the cost optimization opportunities across AWS, that's in your account and regions, into a single dashboard. It also quantifies estimated savings that incorporate your AWS pricing discounts, which includes reserve instance discounts and savings plan discounts. It also aggregates and deduplicates savings across related cost optimization opportunities, which I'll dive into a little bit deeper later. And then it gives you a single dashboard so that you can just sort your optimization opportunities by savings so that you can understand, like, what are the top 3 actions I can take to optimize my spend? So I want to do a quick, so this feature is available to everybody. We just announced it on Sunday, which is just 2 days ago. And I want to do a quick demo of this feature so that everybody can get a very direct understanding of how you can benefit from this. So this is the opt-in page of Customization Hub. So this feature requires an opt-in, and it's very easy. If you just go to the new AWS Billing Cost Management console, and there's a link Customization Hub under the Savings and Commitments section, you will see this page. You scroll down, there's Enable button, you click on it, and all the and the Customization Hub will be enabled immediately, and it takes about 24 hours to gather all the recommendations in your account and regions and show it in a single dashboard. So I have an account that has all these opportunities pre-populated, so this is what you're going to see after 24 hours. At the center of the screen, you will see a donut chart, which essentially tells you how much you can save across all the regions and accounts. So in this demo account, you can see that it's going to save you $1,933 per month. You can group these estimated savings by various dimensions. So at the moment, it's grouped by AWS region. You can group it by AWS account. So there are 2 accounts in this organization, and you can see what's the relative proportion of the savings opportunities. You can also group it by recommended actions. So we import over 15 types of customization recommendations into a single dashboard. So here you can see how much you can save by moving your instance to Graviton, how much you can save by stopping the instances for those resources that are idle, how much you can save by purchasing savings plans and right size, and or purchase reserve instances. You can also filter all the recommendations. So we allow you to filter by account. If you log in as management account of organization, you can just choose one of them. It's Customization Hub supports multi-region, so you can also filter by regions. You can also filter by resource types. These are all the resource types: EC2 instances, EBS volumes, ECS services are running on Fargate, Lambda functions. These are all recommendations that are supported by Compute Optimizer today. And also all the savings plans and reserve instances, these are all available in AWS Cost Explorer today. And Customization Hub essentially aggregates all these recommendations into a single dashboard. You can also filter your savings by tags. For example, if you use cost allocation tags and you, for example, use account, or use app as a tag key, and app1 as a tag value, then it shows you only the savings opportunity that matches the tag filter. So if you use cost allocation tags to do cost allocation across multiple accounts for different applications, that's a very handy way for you to understand like which application or which team has the biggest savings opportunity. After you figure out like what the top areas of optimizations that you have in your account, you can click on View Opportunities. And this list gives you all the cost optimization recommendations that Customization Hub has identified, sorted by estimated monthly savings. So by default, it always shows you the top actions that are going to save the most money, and then ordered by the resource types. So, for example, if you could just click on the first one, in this account, the top action is to purchase Compute Savings Plan, which will save you $948. Next, the second action is to stop an EC2 instance because this EC2 instance is idle, and this is going to save you $496. There's a toggle on the upper right, which is group-related recommendations. So as Rick just talked about, there are multiple actions that you can take on related resources. For example, if you have an idle resource, they can stop it. If you, for the same resource, if you want to keep it, for some reason, you can right-size it, or you can move it to Graviton. But you can't really take these actions at the same time, right? For example, if you stop an instance, you can no longer right-size it, right? So Cost Optimization Hub intelligently identify these overlapping opportunities and group them so that it picks the opportunity with the highest savings and then automatically hides the recommendations that has lower savings. So it gives you a very clear picture of what is the total savings that is achievable. Right? It doesn't just blindly add up all the savings into one single number, because that's going to be unrealistic, and that's probably, if you just blindly add it up, it's probably going to be bigger than AWS Bill, because you can just take so many actions to optimize your spend. Right? So if you want to see all your recommendations, then you can just uncheck this one. Then you can see there's 8 pages of the recommendations. You can actually see, for example, let me just filter it by EC2 instance type. And you can see for this same resource ID, there are 2 actions here. One is to stop it, one is to move to Graviton, and then there is also a right-sizing action. If you group it, you only see 1 line. Right, so that's a very handy feature for you to understand, like, what is the top action I should be taking on each individual resource. Now let's go back to the donut chart page again. So at the center, you will see this number which says, in aggregate, you can save $1,900. So this number is also a deduplicated savings number. So remember, we just talked about, like, you can only take 1 action on idle instance. You can stop it, you can right-size it, you can move to Graviton, but not all, right? At the same time, there's also another level of consideration here. For example, if you have an idle instance in a particular region and you get a savings plan recommendation, if you stop the idle instance, the savings plan benefit you will get is actually going to be smaller than the savings benefits you get from cost controller, because your overall usage will decrease. And the amount of the overlap should be deducted from the total savings opportunity as well. And customization helps you to do that intelligently as well. So if you look at this number, this will essentially tells you if you do all the resource level recommendations, like if you terminate all the stop the idle instances, if you do all the right sizing, if you do all moving to Graviton for things that are eligible, and then after everything is done, then we estimate the savings plan benefit or reserve instance benefit for the remaining usage. And then we add up these savings number on top of your post-optimized resource-based cost. And then it tells you what is the total optimized bill, and then compare the difference between the total optimized bill and your current bill, and this gives you the overall savings amount. And at the bottom, you can see it helps you to benchmark how optimized you are. For example, for this account, you can see the savings number is $1,900, which represents about 80% of your last month's bill, which means that if you take all these optimization recommendations, you're actually able to reduce your bill by 80%. So that's kind of like the overview of the cost optimization hub, and let me just switch back to presentation. So yeah, we just talked about you're able to just aggregate savings potentials by AWS accounts and AWS regions. You'll be able to see the estimated savings opportunity, and you can benchmark the cost efficiency by just dividing the estimated savings, which is the number in the center of the donut chart, divided by your net amortized cost over the last 30 days. Right? That's essentially it's how much you can save, divided by how much you're spending, and that's a ratio. And you can actually track that ratio over time to see, like, hey, this month I can save 20%. I do a bunch of things. The next month I only have 15% savings opportunity left, right? The next month I stopped some idle instances. I only have 10%, right? The numbers would actually just go down, and when you approach to like 3% or 5%, that's where we think like the optimal state should be. So we talk about group-related recommendations, and you can sort all the savings opportunities. And when you click on the recommendation, you can actually see a bottom panel which shows you all the recommendations and savings details. And we'll also talk about how we add up the different savings. For example, an idle instance can be stopped or right-sized, but you can't really do both. Right? Savings plan recommendations can also cover the resource to be right-sized or stopped. Right? So you have to kind of adjust the savings plan purchases based on your post-optimized usage. So that you can quantify your achievable savings and benchmark your cost efficiencies over time. So this feature, again, is available to everybody, and I encourage everybody to take a look at it. And if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. So that reached the end of the presentation. Just to recap, so we talk about the optimization best practices. We talk about all the amazing compute optimizer launches, which include tag filterings, which includes GPU right-sizing, SQL licensing optimization, and right-sizing customization, which we just launched 2 days ago. We also talk about discount purchasing launches for savings plan visualization and a new recommendation for you to purchase MemoryDB eyes. And we have a demo on the Customization Hub. So that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much for coming to this session. And if you have any questions, Rick and myself will be here for a while to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.